Carlos Mendoza had been driving Uber in Miami for 3 years, working 12-hour shifts just to pay rent on his tiny studio apartment in Hialeah. That rainy Tuesday evening in October, he was exhausted, running on his fourth cup of gas station coffee, when the ride request came in at 11:47 p.m. Pickup location: Jackson Memorial Hospital. Drop-off: a luxury address in Coral Gables he'd only driven past, never to. The passenger was an elderly man in his late 70s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit despite the weather. He moved slowly, clearly in discomfort, as Carlos jumped out to help him into the back seat. The man's breathing was labored, and Carlos could see the exhaustion of someone who'd just endured a long, difficult day. "Thank you, son," the man said, his voice weak but genuinely kind. "I apologize, but I seem to have forgotten my wallet inside the hospital. Would you mind waiting while I go back to retrieve money for the fare?" Carlos glanced at the meter. $27.50 plus tip would probably be around $35. He looked at the elderly passenger struggling to even sit upright, clearly drained from what was probably devastating medical news. The man was already reaching for the door handle, preparing to walk back through the rain to the hospital entrance. "Don't worry about it, sir. This one's on me. You look like you've had enough to deal with today." That simple decision would change Carlos's life in ways he never imagined. Welcome to Stories Worth Telling. Before we begin this incredible story of compassion and unexpected miracles, please let us know in the comments which city you're watching us from today, and if you believe stories like these deserve to be remembered. Hit that subscribe button and help us ensure they're never forgotten. The elderly man, whose name was Robert Chen, stared at Carlos through the rearview mirror with surprise. In his 78 years of life, Robert had grown accustomed to people knowing exactly who he was and what he was worth. As the founder of Chen Technologies, one of the largest software companies in the Southeast, Robert's face had been on magazine covers, his name in headlines. People usually recognized him, and when they did, they wanted something. But this young Uber driver clearly had no idea he was sitting 3 feet away from a man worth $3.2 billion, according to the latest Forbes list. "Are you certain?" Robert asked, studying Carlos's reflection in the mirror. "The fare, the tip. I could have my assistant send payment tomorrow." "Really, it's fine," Carlos replied, pulling away from the hospital. "We all have rough days. Someone helped me once when I needed it, just passing it forward." The ride to Coral Gables took 15 minutes through Miami's rain-soaked streets. Robert remained quiet, occasionally glancing at Carlos, taking note of the young man's worn clothing, the duct tape holding together a crack in the dashboard, the way Carlos had to jiggle the radio when it cut out. This was clearly someone who understood financial struggle intimately. When they arrived at the address, a modest apartment complex that Robert owned, but had never actually visited, Carlos helped the elderly man out of the car. "Thank you again," Robert said, standing in the drizzle. "You've been very kind. Take care of yourself, sir. I hope whatever brought you to the hospital tonight works out okay." As Carlos drove away, Robert stood watching the taillights disappear into the Miami night. For the past 10 years, ever since his doctor had given him his first serious health warning, Robert had been conducting a quiet experiment. He'd been searching for something that money couldn't buy: genuine human kindness with no expectation of return. You see, Robert Chen had learned the hard way that extreme wealth came with a peculiar curse. Every friendship felt transactional. Every relationship seemed to have an agenda. Even family members treated him differently once they learned about the fortune he'd built. Robert had spent the last decade of his life wondering if true, unconditional kindness still existed in the world. Tonight, in the back seat of a beat-up Honda Civic, he'd found his answer. Carlos, meanwhile, had no idea that his small act of kindness had just passed the most important test of his life. 3 days later, Carlos was finishing another long shift when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was crisp, professional. "Mr. Carlos Mendoza?" "Yes, this is Carlos." My name is Jonathan Walsh. I'm an attorney with Morrison, Walsh & Associates. I represent the estate of Robert Chen. Mr. Chen passed away yesterday evening, and there are matters concerning his will that require your immediate attention. Carlos nearly dropped his phone. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. I don't know anyone named Robert Chen. Tuesday evening, October 15th, approximately 11:47 p.m. You provided transportation for Mr. Chen from Jackson Memorial Hospital to 2847 Coral Way. You refused payment for the fare. Does this sound familiar? Carlos's heart began to race. The elderly gentleman, that was Robert Chen? Yes, Mr. Mendoza. And according to his will, which was revised 3 days ago, you've been named as a beneficiary. We need to meet immediately. Are you available this afternoon? 2 hours later, Carlos sat in a gleaming conference room in downtown Miami, feeling completely out of place in his Uber-driving clothes among lawyers in $1,000 suits. Jonathan Walsh, a distinguished man in his 60s, slid a thick document across the mahogany table. Mr. Chen was very specific in his instructions, Walsh began. He told me that on Tuesday evening he encountered someone who restored his faith in human nature, someone who showed him kindness without knowing who he was or what he could offer in return. Carlos stared at the document, unable to process what he was reading. I don't understand, I didn't charge him for the ride. It was raining, he looked upset, it seemed like the right thing to do. Exactly, Walsh said. Mr. Chen spent the last 10 years of his life searching for that exact quality, unconditional kindness. He'd grown convinced it no longer existed. The lawyer opened to a specific page in the will. Mr. Chen has left you $5 million, Mr. Mendoza. The words hit Carlos like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table, feeling dizzy. $5 million? I can't, this has to be a mistake. There's more, Walsh continued. Mr. Chen also established the Robert Chen Foundation for Acts of Kindness with an initial endowment of $50 million. He's named you as the foundation's director with an annual salary of $200,000. Your job will be to identify and reward people who show genuine kindness to strangers, just as you showed kindness to him. Carlos couldn't speak. He thought about his studio apartment, the ramen noodles he'd been eating for dinner because he couldn't afford anything else, the stress of wondering how he'd make rent each month. 3 days ago, he'd been a struggling Uber driver. Now he was being handed a fortune and a purpose beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Why me? He finally whispered. Walsh smiled. Mr. Chen left a personal note for you. He handed Carlos a handwritten letter. Dear Carlos, in 78 years of life, I learned that wealth brings many things, but it rarely brings the opportunity to witness pure human kindness. Tuesday night, you gave me something more valuable than the billions I've accumulated. You reminded me that good people still exist. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what I could offer you. You simply saw an elderly man having a difficult day and chose to help. That choice revealed your character in ways that no resume or interview ever could. I'm giving you this money not as payment for your kindness, but as a tool to multiply it. The foundation I've created will allow you to find others like yourself, people who choose compassion over profit, empathy over advantage. Use this gift to prove that kindness is contagious. Show the world that one act of genuine care can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. Thank you for giving an old man hope in his final days. Robert Chen. Carlos read the letter 3 times before the tears made it impossible to continue. When he looked up, Walsh was watching him with a gentle expression. Mr. Chen made his fortune by recognizing potential that others missed, the lawyer said. He saw something in you that night, Carlos. Something worth betting on. 6 months later, Carlos stood in the same conference room, but this time he was wearing a tailored suit and presenting the foundation's first quarterly report to the board of directors. The Robert Chen Foundation had already distributed $2 million to 847 individuals who had shown extraordinary kindness to strangers. There was Maria Gonzalez, a hospital janitor in Los Angeles, who used her own money to buy birthday cakes for patients who had no visitors. The foundation paid off her student loans and funded her nursing school education. There was David Park, a taxi driver in New York who drove a pregnant woman to the hospital for free when she went into labor. The foundation gave him $50,000 to start his own transportation company serving underserved communities. There was Sarah Williams, a grocery store clerk in Atlanta, who regularly paid for elderly customers' groceries when their food stamps ran out. The foundation helped her open her own community market that provided affordable food to low-income neighborhoods. Each story reinforced what Robert Chen had believed. Kindness wasn't rare because people lacked the capacity for it. It was rare because people lacked the recognition and encouragement to express it. The foundation has received over 12,000 nominations in 6 months, Carlos reported to the board. We're not just changing the lives of the people we help, we're changing the way communities think about kindness itself. One board member, Mrs. Harrison, raised her hand. Carlos, tell us about the most impact nomination you've received. Carlos smiled, thinking about the story that had arrived just the week before. A 16-year-old girl in Phoenix named Isabella Martinez. She spends her weekends at a retirement home, not for community service hours or college applications, but because she noticed that some residents never get visitors. She brings her guitar and plays music for them, helps them video call their families, just sits and listens to their stories. He paused, remembering his own surprise when he'd read the nomination. The person who nominated her was one of the residents, a 94-year-old World War II veteran named Frank Sullivan. He saved up his Social Security money for 3 months to send us a $100 check, asking us to help Isabella because she gives us something more valuable than money. She gives us dignity. The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of Frank's words settling over everyone. What did the foundation do? Mrs. Harrison asked. We're funding Isabella's full college education, Carlos said. But more importantly, we're partnering with retirement homes across the country to create the Isabella Martinez Intergenerational Program. We want to replicate what she's doing everywhere. After the meeting, Carlos walked to his car, no longer the beat-up Honda, but a practical Toyota that reflected his new understanding of money as a tool rather than a status symbol. As he drove through Miami, he passed the intersection where he'd picked up Robert Chen that rainy night 6 months ago. Carlos often thought about what Robert had written in his letter about kindness being contagious. The foundation was proving that theory correct in ways that amazed him daily. Every act of kindness they rewarded seemed to inspire 3 more. Every story they shared seemed to encourage others to look for opportunities to help. But the most profound change wasn't in the lives they were touching. It was in Carlos himself. The young man who had once worried about making rent was now thinking about legacy, about how to use resources to create lasting change, about the responsibility that comes with the power to transform lives. That evening, Carlos received a call that would remind him why Robert Chen's mission was so important. The caller was Miguel Santos, a fellow Uber driver. Carlos, man, I heard about what happened to you, the whole story, and I wanted to tell you something. What's up, Miguel? Last week, I picked up this woman from the airport. Older lady, seemed really stressed. During the ride, she started crying, telling me her husband had just died and she was coming back from the funeral. She didn't have enough cash for the full fare. Carlos listened, knowing where this story was going. Normally, I might have asked her to get more money or use a card, Miguel continued, but I remembered your story about how one free ride changed everything, so I told her it was on me. You know what happened? Tell me. She called my company the next day. Turns out she's some big executive at American Airlines. She hired our whole fleet for their executive transportation contract. It's worth $200,000 a year to our company, all because I remembered what kindness could do. After Miguel hung up, Carlos sat in his apartment, now a comfortable 2-bedroom place where he'd been able to bring his parents to live with him, and thought about the ripple effects Robert Chen had set in motion. One elderly man, facing his mortality, had decided to test whether genuine kindness still existed. One young driver, struggling to survive, had chosen empathy over profit. That single interaction had created a foundation that was now changing thousands of lives, inspiring countless more acts of kindness, and proving that Robert's theory about the contagious nature of compassion was absolutely correct. Carlos opened his laptop and began typing his weekly blog post for the Foundation's website. He'd started writing these posts as a way to share the stories they encountered, but they'd become something more, a weekly reminder to the world that kindness wasn't naive or outdated, but revolutionary and necessary. This week, I was reminded that kindness isn't just about the immediate impact of our actions. It's about the example we set, the permission we give others to choose compassion, the proof we offer that people are fundamentally good. Chen taught me that wealth without purpose is just accumulation. But kindness with intention can change the world. Every time we choose to help someone who can't help us back, we're investing in a future where that choice becomes easier for everyone. 6 months ago, I thought success meant having enough money to pay my bills. Now I understand that success means having enough courage to see beyond yourself, enough wisdom to recognize opportunity in everyday moments, and enough heart to act when action is needed. The ride that changed my life lasted 15 minutes. The kindness that inspired it took 30 seconds. The impact it created will last generations. Tomorrow, someone will have the opportunity to show unexpected kindness to a stranger. Someone will have the chance to help without expectation of return. Someone will be tested on their character when they think no one is watching. That someone might be you. Choose kindness. You never know when it might change everything. As Carlos finished writing, his phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Walsh. Robert would be proud. The foundation just received its largest donation yet, $10 million from a tech CEO who read about Isabella Martinez in yesterday's news article. He said your story reminded him why he got into business in the first place. Carlos smiled, thinking about Chen and the test that had started it all. The elderly man had been searching for proof that good people still existed. Instead, he'd created a system that was actively producing more of them. The rain had stopped outside Carlos's window, and Miami glittered under the clear night sky. Somewhere in the city, another Uber driver was probably picking up another passenger who seemed ordinary, but might be extraordinary. Another act of kindness was probably occurring in a hospital parking lot, at a grocery store checkout, in the back seat of a taxi. Chen's legacy wasn't just the money he'd left behind. It was the reminder that every human interaction contains the possibility of transformation. Every choice to help rather than ignore creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. Carlos had learned that inheriting $5 million was life-changing, but inheriting the responsibility to multiply kindness? That was world-changing. And it had all started with a $30 Uber fare that a struggling driver chose not to collect from an elderly man having the worst night of his life. Sometimes the most powerful gifts are the ones we decide not to take. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey that reminds us how one moment of kindness can create waves of change that touch countless lives. Carlos's story shows us that we never know who we're really helping, and we never know how far our compassion might travel. The next time you have the opportunity to help someone who can't help you back, remember Chen and Carlos Mendoza. Remember that kindness isn't just about the person in front of you, it's about the world you're helping to create. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of human connection, please like, share, and subscribe to Stories Worth Telling. Together, we ensure that stories of hope, generosity, and unexpected miracles are never forgotten. Which city are you watching from today? Have you ever experienced or witnessed an act of kindness that changed someone's life? Share your story in the comments below. Your kindness might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Until next time, choose compassion, stay open to possibility, and remember that your next act of kindness might just change the world.